Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the library. Welcome to your library. Thank you very much for joining us tonight on what is an experimental and innovative program that we hope will continue to celebrate moments from Boston's musical past and from items from the Boston's own music collection.
So 150 years ago, the greatest musical extravaganza the world had ever seen was held right here in Copley Square. It was envisioned as a spectacular celebration of peace after the Union victory in the Civil War. And it featured choral performances, orchestras, and giant brass bands. I think that just barely hints at the scale of the performance. The second act featured a newly written hymn of peace, the William Tell Overture, and then the Anvil Chorus. The Anvil Chorus was truly a spectacle to behold. It was sung by 10,000 vocalists who were backed by 1,000 instrumentalists. There was a battery of cannons, a convocation of church bells, a custom-made bass drum 8 feet in diameter, the world's largest pipe organ. And then at the climax, in marched 100 Boston firefighters carrying sledgehammers, who then pounded anvils in unison.
Never in my life did I imagine that I would follow a group of firefighters playing anvils in a public library. And for that, I want to offer special thanks to the associates for putting together what I think is an extraordinarily creative event and concert this evening, the likes of which I am almost certain you will never experience again. Tonight we commemorate a Jubilee that marked the end of a civil war that epitomized a divided nation, what was thought of as the restoration of peace that was celebrated in 1869, in 1872, and I should note there was a 20-year retrospective that took place in 1889. The Civil War killed or maimed 620,000 Americans over the course of 4 years. Particularly in the South, the devastation of being a loser in that great conflict prevailed for decades, and those decades became generations, leading to much unfinished business, the effects of which we still feel today. As a nation, and particularly here in the North, we were inclined in 1869 towards a sense of jubilation, but we also didn't entirely put together and in place and then sustain the mechanisms that could lead to reconciliation and healing. The lingering results of that lack of healing included a shortened Reconstruction, decades of violence and Jim Crow laws, and lingering patterns of segregation in the South and here in the North. A full century after that war, the civil rights movement in the 1950s and 60s became a key indicator of our nation's effort to address those lingering racial inequalities and injustice. I was personally able to participate in that movement as a college student who took part in the march on Selma, Alabama. These days, when I mention that to my students, they think I must have played some great heroic role, but the fact is, my role was very small. I drove south with 2 divinity students, and when I got to Selma, I ended up making sandwiches for the marchers. I was a very small part of a large infrastructure that ultimately produced voting successes and a number of changes across the South. But even with that small role, I learned that very small acts of conscience can be transformative, both for myself and perhaps in some ways for others.
Watch out for performances of Handel. That was just beautiful. So as music moves us and touches our soul, so does poetry.
Good evening, everybody. So good to see y'all's faces. So my name is Porsha Olayiwola, and I identify as half Nigerian and half Black Chicagoan. Which is to say, I have the luxury of knowing the direct lineage of my name, Olayiwola. But as, a person who, got her degree in African American Studies, and also is just very much so a part of the Black diaspora, I often thought about the lineage of my mother's name. And recently started writing a book and took some time to kind of just do some research about the lineage of the name. And I wrote this poem that I'm going to share with you all. So I hope you all enjoy. After the Civil War, many recently freed slaves took a last name like Freedman or Freeman. Others took the last name of their slave masters. Some because they had to swiftly give a name to their newly acquired citizenship. Others with the hopes that they may be reunited with family who had been sold or separated during the institution of slavery. People wonder about Black names, why the names aren't shorter, why the runaway syllables aren't easier to catch, about why we name our children after birds, after cars, after movement, wonder why Black names are always spelled with distinction, why Black names always have a flair. It's because countries who declare independence get to name themselves, because the marginalized will always know reclamation. And when our names do not have your lineage, when our names are not what you expect, then what did you expect? For us to introduce ourselves, still running, for us to shake hands, still dripping the blood you drew.
There is music that transcends even the most righteous anger. And we hope that we're offering this to you in a spirit of reconciliation, as the Peace Jubilee offered for reconciliation. To love one another, not to bury the past, but to accept it, but to move on.